Hi there. So I decided I wanted to take a video just showing some of the stuff that I do as a self-published author, someone that's a little bit new in the indie author space. So one thing that I really struggled with in my first book, and that just seems to be a little bit more difficult to begin with in general, was figuring out who is going to edit your book. Because I don't have this huge budget to spend like thousands and thousands of dollars on editors. But I also want to make sure I'm getting like a really good editor for my book so it doesn't end up being unpolished. So I'm just going to share with you just some of the things that I do to vet the editor. I have 5 ways to vet your editor. First thing that I do, I look at author recommendations in the same genre. So for me, that would be young adult fantasy. For you, that could be sci-fi, could be paranormal romance, whatever. But if you know other authors in that community that are writing the same genre, it really helps to ask for recommendations. I happen to usually ask someone that I work with, Brittany Chanel, but I also have asked like a couple of other authors like Matilda Reyes. So that can help the author recommendations. The second thing, a sample edit. Most editors should do this. If you're going through Fiverr, it's a little bit more tricky, but typically when you're looking at people's websites, they'll have the option of like, I can do a sample edit of 2,000, 3,000, however many words. Definitely do that sample edit. Look at it and see if it's what you want and if they're doing extensive enough edits. Because sometimes you'll get back the sample edit and you just don't feel like it's very good quality. So trust that gut instinct if you feel like that it's not the quality that you were hoping for. Because in the sample edit, that's like their best chance to give a good first impression. That's probably about as good as you're going to get from that editor. So if the sample edit's not very good, probably don't go with them as an editor. I would maybe even go as far as to have a friend or family member look at the sample edit too and see what they think, especially if they read the genre that you're writing. The third thing I would recommend, check for the ratings of other books they've edited. Sometimes that's not an option depending on if the author chose to put them down as an editor. But sometimes if you look up that author's or the editor's name, you might be able to find them on Amazon and see what else have they edited. Now, if you go and you look up on Amazon stuff that they've edited and you see reviews like it looks like it was poorly edited and things like that, that might be a little bit of a red flag. I mean, sometimes the author just might not decide to apply the edits and that's what the problem ends up being. But if you're seeing that consistently, then that's a sign that you might not want to go with that editor. Fourth thing, if you're familiar with something called PipMad, which you may not be, it's basically where you pitch on Twitter to literary agents. So like they have a list of mentors and literary agents and stuff like that that participate in PipMad. So one thing that I did, although this isn't something you have to do, is I went through the mentors in my genre and young adult fantasy and saw who does editing and was able to get a pretty big pool of editors through there. So that's another thing you can do. And the fifth thing I like to look at is credentials. So I go to check and see if this person has worked for a big publishing house as an editor. Has this person written for any big companies, like done articles? Have they written books? Because sometimes they might also be an author too. So that's something that you really want to check. I'm saying this as an English teacher, while English teachers are awesome, they might not always make the best editors. Maybe for a proofreader, especially if they're really good with grammar and conventions, but you are better off having someone that's really experienced with editing and that knows how to make changes to things like character arcs, to things like plot holes when you're looking for an editor. So like developmental editor, you want to know that that person's going to be able to check for big picture things, plot holes, etc. If you're looking for like a proofreader, you want to know that that person has a really good grasp of grammar and spelling and conventions and things like that. If you're looking for a line editor, you want to know that that person is really good with the language, that they're going to make sure that your sentences flow really smoothly. So those are my 5 things that I would recommend looking at before you decide to choose an editor. And of course, my 6th bonus thing is 20 books to 50K. They have some really good self-promotion threads where you can look at people who are trying to find some clients, and they are editors. Most of those people are also writers as well, which is awesome. I would still do some of those other things to vet the editor. Don't just look at the self-promotion thread. Check their credentials too. Make sure that this person knows what they're talking about. And my final thing that I would do is obviously check to make sure that this person's in your budget. They could be the best editor in the world, but if you can't afford them, then you're probably not going to pick them anyway. So double check the pricing as well, and that would be the last thing I would recommend for picking an editor.